So I'm Brian Argrett. I'm the president and CEO of City First Bank of DC. Here and City First Bank of DC is a community development financial institution here in Washington, D.C. that focuses on really underserved communities and providing capital, which translates into jobs and housing and health facilities for our community. Yeah, so you may not have heard of us because primarily most of our lending is to businesses or to nonprofits. So a lot of individual customers may not have heard of the bank from that standpoint. But what we do provide individual customers is the opportunity to make deposits into the bank, which we then turn around and make loans into nonprofits or to small businesses, again, within our own community. And so what's different about that than, say, any other bank or institution is that really you're banking, at home, right? You're bringing your money. It'll earn the same rate of interest. It'll have the same protection from the government in terms of the insurance protection from the FDIC. But this money is going back into our community to try and make a difference within the community.
Idea behind
Sure. So the first thing I guess I should say is that we did that through another entity we've created called City First Foundation. And the idea behind that was the City First Bank is in such a unique position in the city in that we intersect with the government, we intersect with developers, with small business owners, with residents, in a lot of different ways, all focused on kind of community development and economic development, really providing access to capital to improve people's lives. So the concept was, hey, since we're in this incredible position, how do we bring together all of the participants, the stakeholders, the folks who care about what we care about or they're involved in business in these areas and focus specifically on wards 7 and 8, specifically east of the river, the Anacostia River, where the differences in demographics are startling, as we all know. It's largely African American, minority communities. When you look at almost every statistic around our economic health, we're trailing, right? And these are the same communities that really matter to us and where we do business. So our concept was, let's get everybody on the ground. We'll go to St. Elizabeth's at the RISE Demonstration Center. I think we assembled some 250 to 300 folks from all walks and said, okay, we know that DC is growing. We know that it's been expanding. Residents are coming in, it's being developed, but is it being done in a way where everybody's sharing, right? So if you know what's coming, if you look at Anacostia, you can see clearly there's lots of interest now, much more interest than there had been, in how that will be developed, right? And having more retail and having more businesses present. But we don't want just the existing residents to get pushed out, right? We want them to be able to share. So the purpose of the conference, get everybody in a room and let's begin to strategize. First, we got to be honest about it and talk about what the problem is, right? Or what the opportunity is. And then get folks who may not be as familiar and many folks who are very, very familiar and start to strategize about how do we do that a little bit more equitably, knowing that it's coming. Complete equity is going to be very difficult, obviously, when you have an area that is coming up, so to speak, right, or people are showing more interest in it. What we know will happen is, on the positive side, what we know will happen is that jobs will be created, right? Buildings will be repurposed, right? They may be abandoned or there may be in a different purpose and they may go to something else. You'll have stuff constructed, right? So the question is, if you don't think about it in advance, we kind of know how that's going to play out, right? And it's going to play out in a way where it's not that it's not equitable, it's completely inequitable or disequitable, right? So what we're trying to do is stem that tide a little bit and say, okay, how do we make this so that folks can participate? So what do I mean? So for example, let's say new housing is going to be built because there's more interest around a commercial corridor that's being developed in a certain portion of the city. So, as you said, new housing is probably going to be more expensive, and that leads to that cycle of displacement. So the question is, okay, well, how do we make sure that some of the housing that's being created, or along with that new housing that's being created, there's also affordable housing that's being created, or that along with some of the construction that's taking place or the new businesses that are being developed, some of the existing businesses have an opportunity for a slice of that pie as it's coming in, right? So it's never going to be, everyone's not going to be happy completely, but the point is how do we make it more equitable? Yeah, so one thing that's really kind of interesting here, and I'd say a little bit of stay tuned, but one of the things that was really interesting that we wanted to do, we didn't want to have just this one day, everybody strategizes, everybody goes home, kind of forgets about it until the next thing or the next project, or they make some relationships and that sort of thing. So we asked the Urban Institute, which is a think tank and a research organization, to come and participate and to try and capture the ideas that were being discussed at this conference, so that we could take that, which literally this report just came out, we could take that and then go back and sit back down with the folks who are actually doing stuff on the ground, be they representatives of residents, be they community activists, be they business owners, et cetera, are really kind of the organizing group for the conference, and say, okay, now, how do we take and execute on some of these ideas? What makes sense in the 20, 30, 40 different ideas that came out of it that we think we can carry to City Hall and say, hey, we really want to see this? Or we can carry to our business partners and say, hey, why don't we try this? This looks like an opportunity that will make some sense coming out of it. So we're right at the point of the paper being released. I think it was actually earlier this week. We're going to reconvene everyone and then make some decisions about going forward. But to your question, what's just one idea that came out of it that's really kind of interesting or intriguing? I mean, it's got to be fleshed out. But as you know, we have a housing production trust fund here in Washington, which is focused on delivering affordable housing within the city. One of the ideas that was put forward is, well, when you talk about some of the commercial corridors, meaning the corridors where there's businesses along each side of the street, so to speak, should we not have a similar type of trust fund, which means it's funded by the city for the benefit of bringing up some of those businesses so that they don't have to leave. In fact, they can improve their business, meaning improve the opportunity within their own real property as that area develops. So that was one idea that came out of that we were interested in exploring a little further. And I think, first of all, I really want folks who are interested in learning more about how we can be more equitable as some of these communities, as capital starts to flow in some of these communities. So who would be interested is your question, right? It would be business owners who are within the community, or folks who are thinking about maybe relocating or opening a business within that community. It would definitely be folks within our city government, right, who have the ability to change the approach about how these areas are developed. Be anybody who just cares. I think it just aggregates a bunch of different ideas and thoughts and some stats about these communities and what economic development within the communities might mean. So when we look at the actual paper that's produced, it starts with kind of looking at some basic demographics, demographic data, and more than just how, what is the demographic data say now, but how would it be different if in fact we had an equal employment rate that we have throughout the city. For example, if we had it in Ward in Ward 7 and Ward 8, and you'd have another 7,000. So one of the findings there was you'd have another 7,000 employed residents. Okay, so that matters to 7,000 people and their families, but it also matters to the whole city. So it's making kind of a dual point there. It's showing the discrepancy in the employment or unemployment rate, but it's also showing how much is lost on an individual life basis as well as on a citywide basis. So some research around items such as that. I just picked out that particular one. It also then talks about, okay, what are some of the housing priorities within some of the east of the river communities, and they're very different. Obviously, in Ward 7, you have a different home ownership rate than you have in Ward 8, and it's even different, obviously, by neighborhood. Congress Heights is very different from Deanwood, right? So you have very, very different dynamics there. It doesn't explore into all of the different neighborhoods, but it does say, okay, to the extent that you have lower cost of land, that gives you some opportunities to get ahead of the curve and to be able to preserve some affordable housing rather than in a high cost of land area where it's almost too late. It's very hard to build affordable housing. So there's also discussion, or there was discussion at the conference and therefore in the paper around, really it came down a lot to jobs. You know, I mean, at the end of the day, to be able to support small business, to be able to enjoy the level of housing that we all want to enjoy, it all requires income. And so it comes back to jobs. And so that's why, again, as we look at kind of the changes that are coming, how do we make sure that there's job creation that benefits the residents who are there, as well as those who may be coming in. So it is online at cityfirstfoundation.org, which is the foundation's website, so you can pull it from there. You can also go to urban.org, which is the Urban Institute's website, and we'll be producing some hard copies. And again, when the group gets back together, they'll kind of come up with the attack plan of, okay, how do we make sure this gets out? Who needs to see it? What's the messaging that needs to go along with it? So that's still the stay tuned part of work to be done. Right, so the follow-up from the report is a little bit, as I said, in designing what needs to be done or what can be done out of that, picking one or two really good ideas and trying to chase them down hard and go after it. And again, it won't just be, it's really not the bank, it's really we're in the position of trying to facilitate everyone collectively kind of doing that. So that's kind of our role. The way we've thought about and tried to educate and convene folks around issues, in addition to what we did last year, this upcoming year, we'll be looking at the H Street corridor in Northeast, and looking at it going really all the way out to far Northeast, and looking at jobs, small business, and the commercial corridor itself, and asking a different set of questions around kind of job creation and wealth creation fueled by small business. And you have obviously one area where things have changed fairly rapidly. We have a trolley coming in, and you have other areas where there's very little commercial development that's taken place, and very, very little business location that's taken place there. So we're going to examine that issue as well. Hopefully some real productive answers will come out of that too.